Arturo. Hi.
Hi. Buenas tardes, good afternoon, early evening. My name is Ani Rivera. I'm the Executive Director at Galería de la Raza. Galería was founded in 1970 and since has been dedicated to promote Chicanx, Latinx art and culture. Our creative placekeeping ethos is rooted in social inclusion and justice, where community arts are central to navigating the complex intersections of urban development, social inequality, affordable housing, and the historical cultural legacies of communities of color. To implement our mission, Galería supports artists in the visual, literary, performing arts fields whose work explore new aesthetic possibilities for socially committed art. And I'm really excited to be in this charla and handing it over to my colleague, Lucia.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you can see us and hear us, say hello in the comments and you can reshare. My name is Lucia Obregon. I am the Community Leadership Development at MEDA, and we are the Mission Economic Development Agency. And so welcome to everyone to our special programming with Galería de la Raza. We're excited that we could collaborate. And, today's title is Ciudad Santuario, Sanctuary Beyond an Ordinance. So Galería de la Raza and MEDA have partnered to host this, and it's a conversation to discuss the historical context and impact of the 1989 Sanctuary City Ordinance in San Francisco and the different ways in which sanctuary and asylum manifest in our communities. So this is a panel of cultural workers, legal advocates, and artists to learn about our community's commitment to provide sanctuary to those seeking asylum and to learn what you can do to contribute to our city. And so we have the Sanctuary City Project, and Ani is going to tell us a little bit more about that.
The Sanctuary City Project has aimed to engage audiences in creating and spreading stories of migration deeply informed by the community's participation and their contributions in direct relation to their experience, what they've lived and then they share it. Throughout several, interactive installation, mobile print shops, public art interventions, artists Sergio De La Torre and Chris Trejuari have collected and archived over 700 responses to questions that reflect on the notion of sanctuary. Galería is thrilled to partner with the Mission Economic Development Agency to temporarily activate 2205 Mission Street's storefronts with the Sanctuary City Project. This intervention was an installation of banners that also operates in a corner that serves as a vending hub, as well as a site that houses folks and is scheduled to be a future affordable housing development project. We chose to do this during the time of the election and to address not only the election, but the global pandemic that has disproportionately affected Brown, Black, and Indigenous communities. And with the ongoing calls for racial justice and police defunding, the Sanctuary City Project highlights the importance of public space as instrumental for mobilizing our community and providing mental and physical well-being during these very difficult times. This public art intervention, we aim to provide a moment of respite while also joining local and national conversations that concern our communities. Today, as Lucia mentioned, we have a group of community leaders, activists, and overall chingones that are helping advance this very important cause in our community. And we will be having Lariza Dugan Cuadra, who is the Executive Director of CARECEN San Francisco. And I'll read a little bit about Lariza's bio, but she will give us more context. Lariza is committed to building on CARECEN's 30-plus years of history, responding to the needs of Central American diaspora, recently arrived immigrants and greater Latino community in San Francisco and the Bay Area. She is passionate, creative, and an effective community builder and immigrant rights advocate. Prior to joining CARECEN in SF In 2012, Lariza worked at the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development as a senior community development specialist, managing public service grants and community building initiatives in San Francisco. Other professional experiences include working at KQED, Education Network, EdNet, developing media literacy content and Latinx outreach initiatives. At Alternative Family Services, she worked to reunify families with children in the foster care system, and as a young college student, co-facilitated bilingual writing workshops at San Francisco's Youth Guidance Center. Lariza has consulted on projects with San Francisco State University's Miriam Wright's Elderman Institute, Children's Book Press, the Latino Community Foundation, Active Voice, Sesame Workshop, NIAC, and other institutions focused on media, family community development, and presently serves as a treasurer of Alianza America's Board of Directors, a national network of immigrant-led organizations. Lucia, do you want to talk about the other guests?
Yeah. And then we have Amanda Alvarado Ford. Amanda Alvarado Ford received her JD from Delaware University Law School in 1993 and her Bachelor of Arts degree from Stanford University in 1988. She commenced her career as a labor litigator with the National Labor Relations Board, then transitioned to immigration law in 2005. She became a pro bono and immigration coordinating attorney with La Raza Centro Legal in the Mission District, San Francisco, from 2011 to 2017. She worked as an immigration attorney for Siren and the Tahiri Justice Center until La Raza Centro Legal as an executive director in April of 2019. Ms. Alvarado Ford was named a pro bono VIP and a pro bono champion by the AILA in 2014 and 2016, or 2014, 2015, and 2016. She is the chapter chair emeritus 2018 for the Santa Clara Valley chapter and a member of the NJ Bar. Her specialties are humanitarian applications, including U visas and asylum, with an emphasis on deportation defense and working with survivors of trauma and gender-based harm. Welcome, Amanda. And then we also have Sergio De La Torre, who is an artist and an educator. Sergio De La Torre's work often invokes collaborations with subjects and invites both intimate and critical reflections on topics related to housing, immigration, and labor, to mention only a few. De La Torre purposefully works with individuals from marginalized sectors of the city he works in, including factory workers in Tijuana, Shushan Boys, Mexico City, undocumented immigrants, LA and San Francisco, and evicted families in Oakland. In his work, De La Torre has tried to approach the lives of these individuals not as victim subjects, but rather has attempted to re-examine the meaning of their actions in context of shifting global conditions. Thank you, Sergio, for joining us.
Well, thank you all for joining us. This is, I hope, seeks to be a fruitful conversation of looking at some historical context and current conditions. I want to start off with, talking about exactly a little bit more, giving examples of what the Sanctuary City project is. At the beginning of this streaming, we saw a video of banners being installed at the corner of Mission and 18. This is a site that, as mentioned earlier, is going to be affordable housing for families. And in relationship to what's happening in the Mission for the last 20 to 30 years and displacement and its direct connection to the legacies of communities that have been here, we wanted to really think of this site as a point of departure to have that conversation of sanctuary. What does it mean? What does it mean beyond even just the current policy, but the historical colonial lens? And that particular intersection is also home to the American Indian Cultural District, the newly established cultural district. So we're having different conversations to explore sanctuary. And with this particular political moment, I want to hear from Lariza to share the historical city ordinance in San Francisco, how it was established, and how it informs what we're currently also still fighting for. So, Lariza.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, a todas y todos. Really happy to join this conversation with Galería La Raza, MEDA, and the Sanctuary City Project. Thank you for inviting us to participate. Again, my name is Lariza, and I'm really proud to represent the Central American Resource Center, CARECEN of San Francisco, which was born out of the sanctuary movement in the 80s. We were founded in 1986 by Salvadoran refugees in partnership with faith leaders and allies who were responding to the atrocities of the US-backed military dictatorships in Central America in the 70s and 80s, which left a total of more than 300,000 casualties in Guatemala, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, and millions of people displaced from the region seeking refuge all around the world. With the US being the primary destination due to our historical ties to the US, starting back in the 1849s during the gold rush, when the US was looking for alternative routes to make it to the West, that led to the Panama Canal and the famous Andino movement against the canal in Nicaragua. And so we've been tied to the Bay Area and the US ever since. And that, of course, has led to our people following our people. We first came here as economic migrants by choice. And later, as a result of the wars in the 80s, were forced to migrate, just like we're seeing today, with thousands of people once again being forced to migrate due to the failures of our governments, failed foreign policies in the region, and several structural challenges that continue to devastate our countries, including the recent hurricanes, Iota and Eta, which hit the Caribbean coast of Central America in a much greater and painful way than Hurricane Mitch, which was at that time the worst natural disaster in the region. Again, so we're really proud because San Francisco was the birthplace of the sanctuary movement. We were inspired by Berkeley in the 70s when they were talking about protecting Vietnam vets or individuals who were refusing to participate in the Vietnam War. And I think that's what inspired this sanctuary movement and the cities of refuge. In 1984, the Bay Area, sorry, I got that date wrong. In 1985, San Francisco passed the first board resolution declaring our city a city of refuge. Again, the resolutions are so important because they set the tone, that they're a statement of values, which more often than not lead to local ordinance. So that 1985 board resolution led to the passing in 1989 of the San Francisco Sanctuary City Law. Ever since, that's been a core value of our city, and we saw that it once became under attack during the Obama era with the enforcement policies, including secure communities and then priority enforcement program, which resulted in thousands of families, well, millions actually, of migrants being deported to their countries of origin, regardless of what conditions those countries could provide to receive them. Many of them fleeing as political refugees, being politically persecuted or impacted by extreme poverty and all these other structural causes of forced migration. Because of the Obama era policy, San Francisco was once again forced to organize and push back. And this time it became really like a collective citywide effort among all migrant communities, the API, African, Latin American migrants, and migrants from around the world. We came together because we felt it was critical not only to advance and protect the rights of our communities, but also to strengthen our local policies, which at the time the federal government, as we've seen in places like Arizona and Texas, where the federal government wanted local cities to perform the work of the federal government of immigration enforcement. We use a public safety framework to strengthen our local sanctuary cities policy because we came to understand that when migrants are afraid to report crimes or cases where individuals may be victimized, that affects the safety of our entire city. We were able to make that case, and in 2007, we were able to pass a due process for all ordinance, which required that people have the right to their day in court before being turned into ICE. Later, we came in 2010 and organized and advocated for the passing of the no detainer ordinance, which then required for those who had been adjudicated from any court to be released rather than be turned into ICE. This is critical because, again, at the core of this is that no city can be safe when its people are fearful of tapping into local city departments or local law enforcement to protect their safety and well-being. In 2013, under the leadership of then Supervisor John Avalos, and again, with more than 23 organizations, immigrant justice organizations advocating in unity, we passed the 2013 amendment to the Sanctuary City Law, which essentially merged the due process ordinance as well as the no detainer ordinance into our sanctuary law, making it one of the strongest in the country. We're very proud of that. And that definitely set the tone for domino effects across other cities in the nation to strengthen their own local sanctuary policies. Out of this organizing also came our work in overseeing the implementation of the policy, making sure that our city departments develop internal policies and protocols to affirm and uphold this law. And then also, really gaining a lot of support from the greater community on why sanctuary cities are necessary to ensure that we advance our values in cities that are for everyone. Today, despite multiple attempts by various administrations to undermine our sanctuary city policies, these policies have prevailed in the courts, and they have absolutely been determined as constitutional. So we've had many victories, and despite any attempts by the current administration to continue to undermine and maybe even try to force our local cities to collaborate and do their work, we have resisted that. And also, we're very, very proud, and I'll end with this, to be in the state that is the first sanctuary state in the nation, that is California. That is, again, this is 30 years of work. This is 30 years of organizing. And sadly, today, we find ourselves pretty much where we were back in the 80s, which gave birth to this movement for sanctuary cities, because at the time, only 3% of asylum seekers were being granted protection. That was really the impetus for the sanctuary city movement and pushing the cities of refuge so that those who were denied asylum could still be protected. Here we are today, and the current administration has effectively implemented an asylum ban through the Remain in Mexico policy, which violates international agreements, it violates human rights and various international accords that the U.S. has adopted and that is obligated to participate and uphold, including the International Convention on the Protection of Children, which this country has violated. I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but I cannot underscore the importance and the value of having these sanctuary policies. Since Trump, one thing I guess we should be thankful to him for is that there are more sanctuary cities in the country than ever. We saw a massive birth of more than 300 cities adopting sanctuary city policies in response to the election of Donald Trump. And to date, we have more than 560 sanctuary cities across the country. Again, thank you for the opportunity for us to engage in this conversation. I look forward to hearing what my colleagues are going to be presenting as well.
Thank you, Lariza. We will have some follow-up questions. We encourage folks watching, if you have questions, post them on the comments. We will have a Q&A towards the end. I'm going to hand it over to Lucia for the next subject.
Yeah. Thank you, Anya, and thank you, Lariza, for that information. That was very helpful to add context to our conversation. And so, as there is part of that campaign is different slogans, and one of them is "There is no ICE in peace." Sergio, can you please tell us what does it mean, no ICE in peace?
Hi everyone. Thanks, Lucia, for the question. Police brutality that we see in our cities, in San Francisco in particular, in our immigrant communities, comes from not only from local police, but also from ICE. So they come to our communities and they disturb our peace. So that banner is in response to that. In 2008, 2009, we saw, I believe, 15 ICE raids in San Francisco only. They detain hundreds and deport some of them back to both Mexico and Latin America. So that's sort of what the banner is trying to address. Now, the banners, the way this works is that the project engages with others in the creation of these different quotes. So far, we have 40 quotes that we have collected based on almost 2,000 responses.
Wow.
So the project starts in San Francisco, larger Bay Area, goes to San Diego, Tijuana, goes to Seattle, it's in San Antonio, it's going to Massachusetts, it's going to Mexico City. So every time that the project is presented in a different location, we engage with the public. So it is participatory by nature. And so what you see in the banners, we didn't say that. We had questions for the audience when they come into, in this case, galleries or museums, or if we do printing in public, then we engage with others in this conversation. And so one of the questions is, have you ever witnessed an ICE raid? And so there is no ICE in peace comes from that question in particular.
Wow, that's very powerful. And it's powerful because knowing that it comes from the direct testimony. Can you tell us, what does the Sanctuary City project, how does this project contribute to broadening the understanding of violent policies? And how does archiving these experiences help shifting the narrative?
Yeah. The project starts in 2008. And here in San Francisco, it is a collaboration between 6 different people, artists, all of us. And we had an exhibition at a local gallery at Queens Nails Annex down on 29th and Mission. And, at the time we had elected Barack Obama and we thought it was going to be good for the immigrant community, and it was not. So, we had an installation in 2009 and nobody paid attention to the installation. And I'm talking about not only, art goers, our audiences, but also local officials and other institutions. We understood that Obama was not that good for the immigrant community, and not Obama per se, but his administration, right? I mean, those 8 years were very hard on our communities. And in 2017, we got invited again to the Urban Center for the Arts to continue with the project. And like Lariza said, thanks to Trump, there is so much advocacy right now and so much organizing in our communities that there used to be 250 sanctuary cities in this country. Now there are more than 300. Wow. And like I said, California is the first state that became a sanctuary city in 2018.
Yeah, so we're able to see the impact of storytelling, right? And how that shifts narratives and therefore policies. That's very powerful. Thank you. And so you'll be back to share more about this project, but now we're going to transition with Amanda, who's going to talk a little bit about, the policies, right, that terrorize our communities.
Thank you.
Ani?
Hi, Amanda. It's the power of storytelling. It's so important, and how it could really push the dial. And also, when thinking about just not only public art as a means to shift and changing, how important policy and our understanding and to it is in terms of being able to inform and organize our communities. Can you talk to us a little bit about the history of policy tactics of ICE? How does the 2013 due process for all ordinance work against collaborating with ICE? That's just one. And then we have a few more questions, but
Perfect.
share
Thank
with
you, Ani. And thank you for inviting us tonight. We at La Raza Centro Legal in the Mission at 16th and Valencia, we've been there since 1973 in the Mission and in this spot since about 1997. And our founders were Latinx law students who themselves came from families who really were struggling to get a toehold in society, many of whom lived in fear of an ICE raid. It was called INS back then, but it's the same principle. And, what they wanted was a trusted place in our community where their parents and their grandparents and their neighbors could get a consult from a licensed attorney who was culturally competent, spoke their language, and just understood the immigrant experience. So we are honored both to be here tonight and to be what is most likely the only Latinx-led licensed attorney legal aid in the city and county of San Francisco. So thank you so much. We're honored. I think for us, I just want to mention the historical context in which this, problema existe, right? ICE and the federal government and the legacy agency, INS, if you visit federal museums in Washington, D.C., and you go, for example, to the Museum of the American Indigenous People in D.C., you will see the term removal. Okay, that is the same term being used today in San Francisco Immigration Court and in immigration courts around our nation. The term removal. What is it? It's code by our federal government for displacing people of color within the borders of the United States. We've been using it, the federal government has been using it against indigenous peoples throughout history. And they did the same thing when they interned Japanese Americans in World War II. Locally, folks were interned at Tanforan Racetrack here in San Mateo County, and then sent to different detention centers in Topaz, Utah, and all over. And once again, we're seeing it today. Folks are being removed to family detention centers, asylum seekers arriving at our border. So we see a repeating pattern, and ICE is the way that these mass detentions and the mass incarceration is happening. One thing that's really troubling is that we've always had, as some of our other guests tonight, Lariza and Sergio mentioned, of course, we've seen, we thought Obama was going to be good for immigrants. Unfortunately, he was not. He earned the title deporter in chief. However, when Trump took office, what we noticed was that it was taken to a level that we had never seen. The trauma inflicted by the Trump administration by separating minor children from their parents reached a level of psychological and physical and medical harm against minors that our nation has never seen. So when we talk about ICE and the impact of the policing that ICE is doing in our communities and the ICE policies as they're being acted out in our communities today, one message we want to get across is we need to document ICE presence within our communities, both as attorneys working at legal aids, supporting our Latinx immigrant community and the wider base of immigrants in the Bay Area. We also need to remember and inform our people that we have rights, whether we are documented or undocumented. The Constitution protects us all. We all have a right to be free from unlawful search and seizure of our persons and our property. We have a right to refuse ICE entry into our homes if there's not a properly executed judicial warrant signed by a judge. And I've included materials that will be accessible to all so that folks can determine what's a valid, signed by a Superior Court of California judge, what's a valid warrant, and what is a fake warrant signed by some, two-bit ICE agent who, maybe finished high school, maybe has a year or two of college. I certainly don't want to disrespect anybody who hasn't completed college, but there's a big difference between someone who got a job with ICE and someone who's an actual judge, right? And so only the properly executed judicial warrant is one that must be honored. So folks have the right not to open the door. They have the right to see the warrant first. They have the right to ask for the warrant to be slipped under the door or in the mailbox. They have the right to call their attorney prior to saying anything. They can keep their mouths absolutely quiet so that they don't incriminate themselves. They also have a right to a phone call. And the message we want to share with our community is when ICE is in our community, we don't want to spread panic, but rather we want to have a sense of power, empowerment, and we want to reach out to that San Francisco Rapid Response Network, call the hotline, rather than sending text messages and spreading fear amongst our loved ones and our community members, because misinformation can be just as harmful as an actual ICE raid, and we certainly don't want to cause panic. And so that's the message we want to share, and we're hopeful that the Biden administration will bring forth a more humane set of federal policies in terms of ICE. However, we need to stay organized, vigilant, and we need to be ready to file lawsuits, both class actions as well as appeals here locally when we have an individual case that gets denied by a particularly harsh immigration judge. There's a lot of turnover we're seeing in San Francisco Immigration Court right now. The burnout rate for immigration judges is tremendous. We're lucky here we have some very humane ones, but we also have a few judges who do not want to follow asylum law. And so we need to be ready to appeal. And one other thing, Ani, we need a pipeline of lawyers. For every one legal aid, hardworking, honest, ethical attorney we have in San Francisco Immigration Court today, we need at least 50 more. If you have loved ones who have a desire to pursue justice, please encourage them to go to law school, get their degree, and join the battle, because we need you.
That's a great message. Thank you, Amanda. And I hate to put you in the spot, but I think you gave us so really critical information around our rights. Is this the information going to be shared both in English and Spanish at the end, or would you speak a little bit, translate a little bit of that information, particularly around our rights? What are our rights, and what does it mean to document ICE? I think that we have, all of us live in this how do we even approach ICE? How far can they go in? And I think even as allies, we need to be informed of what that means. And so can you speak to a little bit about that in Spanish?
En español, claro que sí. Entonces, quisiera mencionar algunas palabritas en español acerca de cuáles derechos tenemos como inmigrantes y también como aliados a inmigrantes. Y tenemos varios. Entonces, en nuestras casas, si nos llega un agente de ICE, cuando ellos están tocando a la puerta, tenemos el derecho de no abrir la puerta. No tienes que abrir la puerta. Tienes el derecho de decir, mire, yo sé que tengo derechos, y puedes conversar de una forma respetuosa. Siempre es buena idea, y mucho más cuando uno se enfrente con una policía o alguien vestido como policía o vestido como la migra. Entonces tenemos el derecho de decirle, mire, ¿me puedes demostrar el orden que traes? Porque quisiera leerlo, quisiera entenderlo. Por favor, pásamelo bajo la puerta, enséñamelo en la ventana, por favor. Y después puedes hacer un análisis de si es un orden judicial firmado por un juez de la Corte Superior de California, o si es un orden firmado por un agente de la migra de ICE, quien no tiene ningún poder, y usted no tiene que abrir la puerta si fuera el orden firmado por un agente de ICE. Entonces, eso es muy importante. Y también en las notas he incluido 2 ejemplos para que ustedes puedan ver la diferencia entre un orden correcta firmada por un juez de la Corte Superior de California y un orden que no es válido y ustedes no tienen que darle ningún sentido. Y otra cosita, usted puede decir a cualquier agente de ICE con quien se enfrente que usted sabe que tiene el derecho de conversar con su abogada. No importa si usted no tiene abogada. Siempre tus familiares pueden ubicarte una abogada. Entonces tienes que informarles que sabes que tienes derechos. También tienes el derecho de una llamada. Y también, si usted fuera, si alguien quien usted dentro de su familia, un amigo, sea agarrado por la migra, también tiene el derecho de no decir nada, no contestar ninguna pregunta, porque los agentes de ICE siempre quieren básicamente hacer muchas preguntas, a presionar a nuestra comunidad, a admitir de dónde viene, si tiene documentos, dónde está su identificación. Entonces, tenemos el derecho de no decir nada. Entonces, esos derechos son muy importantes y tenemos que acordar en el momento que es muy estresante, tenemos que acordar siempre que tenemos dignidad, que tenemos derechos, que nuestra Constitución nos protege. Gracias.
Wow, that's perfecto. Gracias, Amanda. Thank you, Amanda. I want to talk to both Amanda and Lariza on the next subject. I think that we are at this time where we're feeling, we feel like the pressure of the boiling pot, like it's coming up, right? The lid is kind of lifting slightly. But with having the opportunity to have a new administration that we can call and sort of put on notice and demand for some justice. I want, if you can both speak to what are the current demands as community organizers advocating for migrant families as we prepare for this next administration. Can you both provide what are maybe the top priorities, even as organizers, that you guys are focusing, and how that's being sort of how we can, as supporters and communities, join?
Well, maybe I can start, and then Amanda, you can help me out. Well, today I'm very proud that more than 20 Latinx organizations in San Francisco signed a letter to Speaker Nancy Pelosi, essentially calling for her to familiarize herself with Latinx community and migrant communities' vision of what inclusion and justice would look like in a Biden administration. We're encouraged that Biden is the first president in U.S. history to put forth an immigration plan. It has several points. Some of it, I think, was listed from the advocate's language itself. But, the devil's in the details, as we say. And so we have a lot of work cut out as we move forward. We think that there's three, there's one. The immediate action is for Biden to use his power of the pen, to use his executive power to reverse the Trump administration's executive powers that have been so damaging and that we can't even begin to quantify the suffering and the long-term trauma that migrants who've been subject to these policies will have to endure for decades to come. We are, of course, first and foremost asking that he not only have a task force for the reunification of children separated at the border, but that that task force have members of the Central American diaspora, legal advocates, and organizers at the table to inform what that task force will be doing to guarantee the reunification of children with their families in the U.S., that they be granted protection, and that there be reparations to support their healing from the trauma and from this limbo that they've had to endure. And I do want to highlight that the U.S. government first separated Native children from their families. So this is like and enslaved African children from their families. So, this is a history that has been dragging all along. And I think we've seen young people and allies protest take over the streets to say it's enough. It's time for us to have a limpia and to really move this country forward with a vision that is a vision that includes everyone. Obviously, in the current moment, living through this pandemic, one of our big concerns, we all know, just in San Francisco alone, about a month ago, the statistics was that 51% of all COVID cases were Latinx population. Yesterday, I was on a webinar with Professor Fernandez from the Center for Latino Health Excellence at UCSF, and she said it was 70% now. And what she also said is that, and don't quote me on that number because I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's definitely the incidence of COVID among Latinos has increased just in the last month. And per her own words, this is a migrant virus. Those who are most, and I think there's a challenge because Latino and migrants, Trump has made Latinos a poster board for migrants. And we know that migrants come from all continents of the globe. right? So it's important to differentiate the migrant experience with this, not just Latinx, from Latinos, Chicanos, and first, second, third generation Latinos who, like African Americans and Native American peoples in this country, suffer from great health inequities and disparities. We have another big priority is that there's more than 70,000 migrants stranded at the U.S.-Mexico border. We want an immediate reversal of the asylum ban, and we want an investment or a divestment from private detention centers which monetize human mobility towards immigration courts and towards community development initiatives in the region, so we can really address the root causes of migration. No one wants to leave their home by force, for sure. Migration should be a choice, not a necessity. We have a long list. We're happy to share that. I think advocates across the country right now are aligning. I mean, our demands are the same. The demands just shift in the context, but the demands are about inclusion and justice, due process for migrants. We're not saying, we have been often accused of, oh, you want open borders. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is we want due process. It is an international given human right to seek refuge in the country of your choice. And the U.S. is violating that international agreement. So I'm going to stop there and let Amanda jump in because I know we have
Preach. We were entering. We're feeling it. Amanda.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ani. Thank you, Lariza. Just piggybacking on what Lariza said, let's take a historical look at why do we have asylum law in America today and in so many countries around the globe? It's because of the Holocaust, right? It goes back to 1951, post-Holocaust. We all remember, maybe we don't, but our parents do and our grandparents do. But historically, we all learned it in school. Right. This was a horrific chapter in world history where so many people suffered, and it was a genocide. It was horrific. And so in 1951, the UN got nations together and they decided, we're going to have this treaty and we're going to talk about refugees. We're going to define what is a refugee. We're going to define what is asylum, and they defined these terms, including persecution. What does that look like? What are the elements of persecution? The U.S. at that time signed on to the UN treaty around these principles. And all of the nations that signed on said that when an individual was being persecuted in their country of origin based on their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, when they presented at our borders, we would give them due process. We would give them an interview to find out if their fear of returning to their home country is credible. And so I think what's happened in the U.S. is, with the Trump administration, we've gotten into this very confusing, rhetoric where people are saying, too many people coming to the border and they're just trying to game the system. No, these are asylum seekers, which under the UN policy have a right. They have due process rights. Okay. It's different when you're an economic migrant, simply trying to earn a salary to send home. That's a totally different situation. We're not talking about that situation. We're talking about asylum seekers who under law have due process rights. And so it's very unfortunate that we've seen this uptick in anti-immigrant rhetoric, because what happens is people's rights get trampled on when we engage in this anti-immigrant rhetoric that the country has been involved in. But ultimately, I think we're hopeful that with the new administration, we can turn that situation around. What we're hoping for is to end the Remain in Mexico policy. I was one of several many hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteer attorneys who visited Mexico prior to the pandemic. We went over in groups, we went over as individuals, and we represented asylum seekers in Mexico. Why? Because Trump's administration said that asylum seekers had to stay there until the pandemic happened, and then the border was essentially shut down to asylum seekers. I've also worked with wonderfully dedicated volunteer attorneys in these family detention centers in Texas, in Dilley and in Karnes City, Texas. I've been twice. And all I can say is that the incarceration of immigrant children in these facilities is likely the most inhumane thing I've ever witnessed with my own eyes. Just ridiculous. I mean, the thought that a child should be in a locked facility commingled with unrelated adults makes absolutely no sense. It's just a horrific recipe for disaster, psychologically, health-wise, everything. These family detention centers are staffed with doctors who lack pediatric specialty training. They don't have bilingual teachers, so children are being taught in a language they don't understand. The guards have been, unfortunately, engaging in abusive conduct, verbally and physically, and in some cases sexually, towards not just the immigrants, but all of the allies, some of the attorneys and legal workers who go to try to offer their support. So, we've got a system that really needs a lot of work. We do have some excellent cases that are making some progress in solving some of these problems, like the Flores Settlement Agreement, which has been, it's a legal case that's been nationwide, and it's been in motion since the mid to late 80s with a group out of LA called the Center for Constitutional Law and Human Rights. La Raza Centro Legal is proud to be a plaintiff on that class action litigation. And it sets the standards for conduct and how migrant children are to be treated when they're in detention. Based on the settlement agreement, the first time I went to a family detention center run by Department of Homeland Security was in about 2016. At that time, in Texas, in Dilley and in Carnes, that people were being held there, mothers and children, in this detention center for months on end. I interviewed one mom with her children, and I said, "How long have you been here?" She said, "I've been here going on 4 months, and I don't know when I'm ever getting out." This was 2016. Now we've, together with the Flores lead counsel, a number of private law firms, we've made tremendous progress in that case. Judge for the Central District of California down in LA, Dolly G, she's recently issued some great orders. And so now the time under the settlement agreement has been shrunk down to 20 days that a child can be held in these detention facilities, but they're just rife with problems. So do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. But we're really hoping that the Biden administration will make some key changes and children, immigrants in detention. We got to reunify those 545 immigrant children who've lost their parents. That has to be a number one priority. We need to, really gather our resources there as a new administration to find those parents and make it right, because that should never have happened.
Well, thank you. I feel like we need another hour to really kind of delve deep into this. And this is important. I mean, this is like how can art and policy come together to kind of, inform and provide more context. I mean, these are dire situations that children are living in. And it's very even hard for us that have access to wrap our head of why do we still have children in detention centers. And so thank you for that information. I want to give the floor to Lariza. I know that you have a little bit more information, and then we're going to kind of really come back to focus on the role of arts as well. So Lariza. Did we freeze?
Of the Sanctuary City movement.
Froze. She's coming.
Can you hear me? Am I there?
You got it. Yes, you're here. You've caught on.
During the 80s, the Sanctuary movement in San Francisco was really led by artists. I want to highlight that. And we have some great archival images from the 80s, 70s, and 80s, the Solidarity movement. They fundraised through art. So I just want to, again, we continue that tradition, and we need it more than ever. The other thing I wanted to highlight is the U.S., they withdrew from the Paris environmental climate agreements, or the climate accords. The U.S. also withdrew from the Global Compact on Migration and Refugees. That was the UN in 2015 did the New York Declaration in response to the Syrian refugee crisis in Europe. When we talk about, Trump would make it seem like the U.S. is being invaded. That's actually the word he uses. But when you compare Central American or Latin or human mobility in the Americas, compared to mobility from Africa, the Middle East towards Europe, it pales in comparison. Our numbers are completely manageable. There's no reason why the U.S. should not be able to welcome all these migrants when Europe has been faced with millions and millions of migrants perishing in the ocean trying to find safety. So the U.S. withdrew from the Global Compact on Migration. And in fact, in 2018, when the compacts were adopted by more than 140 nations in Marrakesh, Morocco, the U.S. was actively working against the Global Compact, which is the first document globally that is intended to set some kind of global governance for migration. So it is building on international agreements around the protection of children, human rights, and so on. And this Global Compact has been embedded in the United Nations. Again, 140 nations adopted it, and the U.S. went around bullying countries, including Dominican Republic, who was going to vote for the compact and adopt it, to step back. So that's one of our key demands, is that the U.S. rejoin that global conversation on human mobility so we can ensure there's safe migration for everyone around the globe and that their human rights are protected.
Yeah. Thank you, Lariza and Amanda, for your expertise and for that, and your work, really, for your work and your team and all of the countless people who dedicate their time and efforts to help families and at the border and through their legal cases. So Sergio, this question is for you. You know, besides policy or city ordinance, how do we provide sanctuary as a community, as cultural workers?
Yeah. Lariza, thank you very much. Amanda, that was amazing. That all that information is that the project has been archived for the last 12 years. And yes, it is all this confusion that's happening right now. No idea, who to believe, who to listen to anymore, who to talk to. But anyhow, in organizing, it's been such a tremendous tool for us to continue working on this project. Lucia, when the project gets installed in an institution, in a gallery, a museum, or we go out and bring with the public, we consider the project a sanctuary itself, where you can come in to the project and have a conversation about sanctuary cities and immigration policies. So you have, the right to participate in the project. You're invited to be part of this conversation. And, the banners are a very small part of this project. If you went to YBCA in 2017 to the Sanctuary City print shop, you'll see that we had this timeline in the walls that went from 1989, when the city became a sanctuary, all the way to 2017, that the project was installed at YBCA. And in this timeline, we had, deportations, detentions, remittances, people died at the border, all this legislation, all these laws, 1984, the famous 187 proposition. So all these things, 1994 Mission Act law by the Clinton administration, there's always in the wall. So people can come and take a look at all this information that we have collected, and then they can respond to different questions that we ask them. So once they're there, this project collects pro-immigration responses. We had conversations with people that don't agree with us, and they tell us things that we don't make into posters. Out of 2,000 responses, we have 40 posters that are completely pro-immigration, or that are questioning these practices, right? Like, for example, ICE appears kids, or there is no ICE in peace. Ideally, the sanctuary is the project itself, when it is installed at an institution, or when we go out and play with the public. We have a bicycle that we customize as a printing mobile cart. So we go around mostly Bay Area with the bicycle, and then we bring with people in public. This wall right now that you see in the photograph, that wall, that's on 23rd in Valencia. And this is Cinco de Mayo 2017, 2018, I believe. And they closed Valencia Street. So we brought the bicycle, we printed with the public, 175 posters. 7 hours later, we covered the entire wall with posters. We left a Sharpie on the wall so people can respond to the quote themselves. And the next day we went back and we saw responses to the posters. So it is a conversation that continues. We don't have the last word. We have, if anything, questions about our legal system and the way that the system treats our communities, our families, our brothers and sisters.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that thoughtful answer. And I think one of the main ideas or points, I guess, for me is that, Sanctuary City is not just about protection and kind of like legal protection and immigration policies, but it's about creating communities that allow for immigrant families to participate and thrive. And so a question for this group is, we have a conversation about what it means to have placekeeping, right? And how cultural placekeeping and creating communities, like I said, that are welcoming. So how does housing play a role in this and in creating sanctuary cities? Or why is it important? Yeah, go ahead.
So, when we think of the history of, individually, our experience in housing in the city, as I mentioned earlier, having survived several gentrification waves, and then thinking about cultural anchors and institutions that are here to serve community and to offer a direct response and to encourage for the visualization of a path toward self-determination, like Sanctuary, that is really important. Art is a human right as well. It is known that we need to have access to art. And so when we think about Sanctuary as a whole, it's not just about building the brick and mortar of like having a place to put your head, at night. I mean, it's important and critical, but it's also about the environment, the ethos that we build around it, that where people can see themselves reflected and thrive. And it goes beyond just walking in through some doors, that feel institutionalized, to actually want to be there, to want to be active agents of change, to have access to artistic practice, to inform, visions for the neighborhood. And I feel like you start creating a network that is really much more than just, about policy. It's about community organizing and being in direct responding commitment to those folks. So for us, in thinking about all the buildings that are earmarked to become public, housing, affordable housing, it is important that from the onset of not even just like identifying a site, but raising the funds and thinking of the development, thinking of what it's going to look like, who's going to go in there, the community and art, everything that is part of our living is an artistic expression, our language, our food, our music, our dances, all of that is art. And it has to have a place for us to feel empowered and to feel safe and to be proud of who we are. And I think that that's my vision for community development. That's my vision for housing. And that's why when we see the history, as Lariza said earlier, all the movements have been fueled by arts. We have the record. We just have to make sure that there's always a platform for the artists to come in and to continue to push the boundaries. And, that's why, we choose to look at art. There is the traditional artwork that is important. And then there is the moment of, exploring new artistic aesthetics, because it allows us to think outside the box and explore new ways of frameworks. And so I think that in every single building, especially if it's attached to city funding with public dollars, we need to demand that arts represents a core of that infrastructure, and like that all the ground places are activated by cultural hubs, because those are cradled to sort of end, audiences that we need to be committed to serving in a holistic way. And arts is one of them. So that's my position.
Thank you. I know that Lariza wanted to add something to this question.
Yeah, just briefly, and just let's remember the Mujeres Muralistas. They help to catalyze support for Central American movements. But I wanted to say that today, as we face COVID and we face the reality that Latinx and migrants are most impacted by COVID, we know already, science empirically is showing that one of the ways in which COVID is spreading among our community is due to the poor housing conditions our community has to endure. There's a direct correlation between housing, overcrowding housing or multiple families in one absolutely inappropriate, unhuman, human rights violating housing situation and COVID and the health outcomes. There is no denial. And so once again, COVID has come to shine light on the urgency for affordable housing for all San Franciscans, for migrants, for the working poor. Enough is enough. And, we have catered to the .coms, we have catered to certain sectors. And guess who's the first people to jump ship when things go hard? It's the .comers. We heard that Tesla left the Bay Area. So they throw us really quick out the window. But meantime, they left us with the scars of community separation. They left us with the scars of poor health outcomes due to poor housing conditions. And so I totally support what you're saying, Annie. We need art in every living space, in every community space. But we also need adequate housing more than ever now. Otherwise, we're not going to turn the tide on this pandemic. And we're not going to see better health outcomes for our community.
Yeah, and it's not just about housing in the sense of getting a roof over people's heads, but it's also providing space so that nonprofits or any other stakeholder that provides services can have a home and a place to provide those services. And also, when Annie talks about those cultural hubs and those, those pillars, right? Those cultural pillars that monuments exactly, that allow immigrants to feel like this is their home, right? Culture and art, it's a part of that piece, right? That allows them to feel like they belong somewhere. And so we are at the end of our programming, and I want to thank Galería de la Raza for bringing this topic and being a great collaborator with MEDA. And I will also, to our guests, thank you so much for your work and all of that information that you've given us. I'll give you all the last word. Annie, if you want to say some last remarks, I appreciate you all.
Just echo what you said. I'm really thankful to have your contributions and knowledge to the subject. As an arts organization, that we want to convey and express those most dire fears and hopes. We want to also be informed. And so being able to connect both is really critical. I think that, that is our commitment to our community moving forward. And I can't thank all the artists, including, Sergio, for just pushing and always being, ahead of the curve. And sometimes you feel you're sitting there in your soapbox and you don't have an audience, but things just have a way of working out. And for me, seeing the Sanctuary City project, I didn't even see it here in San Francisco. I knew of it, but I didn't experience it. And the impact that I had seeing it for the first time was being in my hometown of San Diego in a museum that for me as a child felt foreign. So to have had such an impactful message and to see it like a print shop and to be able to take my family, like you realize how time can change the tides, and that, being art has always been the savior. So I just want to thank you guys for contributing. I also want to say to the public that stay tuned. We're very committed to this conversation and to really pushing the next administration forward. For the artists that are watching, we also want to hear from you. We're going to be shortly announcing a project around the first 100 days of the next administration in partnership with other organizations throughout the Bay Area, which include, CARECEN, SF, Chicana Latina Foundation, there's Instituto Familiar de la Raza, and many, many other leaders in the community. So please stay tuned, and just thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for having this important conversation. It's an honor. And thank you to my team too. Y'all rock.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'll just say, para adelante siempre, para atrás ni para agarrar impulso.
Exacto.
And I want to thank MEDA and Galería for working with us on the Sanctuary City project, and thank you Amanda and Lariza for an amazing conversation. This is what fuels our project, talking to nonprofit galleries, and this is amazing. Thank you very much, you all.
Thank you, Sergio. I just want to add that I'm so inspired by all of the work that you all do. I'm someone who enjoys creative arts. And I just want to mention, you reminded me about 16, 18 months ago when I was in Tijuana working with Al Otro Lado, giving consults to asylum seekers from the Northern Triangle, Central American countries. Some kind soul had donated art supplies to the children of the migrants. And so while we were meeting and giving consults and legal screenings to help people formulate and really to understand their asylum claims, their children were at a nearby table making little animalitos with, palitos and feathers. And, the healing power of art, especially for children who are going through trauma, I think cannot be overstated. It's just so important. And so thank you to all of you who occupy the art space, because we need it. And during such a difficult year we've had, we need it now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adelante.
Adelante. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Osito.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Woohoo.